Now to consumer news, and just when you thought your groceries couldn't get any more expensive, guess what? Tomatoes are next on the list to get hit with a price hike, and a big one, too, 17% import tax.
The import duties are now the highest they've been since the Great Depression in 1935.
A convoy of trucks stuck at border crossings, their engines idling crates of bright red tomatoes slowly cooking under the blazing sun. Farmers stand by helplessly watching their livelihoods spoil in real time. In small towns across California's Central Valley, the silence is deafening.
You can't even afford to pick them right now between the cost of the labor and the inputs that go in.
Processing plants go dark. Diners that once bustled with truckers sit half empty, and for sale signs sway in the wind outside family farms. And here's the kicker, this isn't just about tomatoes. No, my friends, this is about the first domino tipping in America's agricultural empire. A domino that, if left unchecked, could send shockwaves through wheat, soybeans, corn, and every other crop that once defined America as the world's breadbasket. So, let me ask you, is this really about food safety and quality control like officials claim? Or is it about something much bigger? Geopolitical maneuvering, economic realignment, and a brutal lesson in what happens when reliability is no longer guaranteed. Make no mistake, this crisis is not about what's on your salad plate. It's about mortgages, schools, hospitals, entire rural towns that depend on the rhythm of agriculture. And it's about global power shifts that are unfolding right under our noses. The first strike came from the north. One morning, in what felt like a bureaucratic ambush, Canada announced an immediate ban on U.S. tomato imports. The official reasoning: quality control issues, pesticide residues, words that sound clinical, detached, almost harmless. But peel back the polite Canadian phrasing and you see the real game. Just 3 weeks before this so-called food safety ban, Ottawa had quietly signed a $180 million deal to expand greenhouse tomato production in British Columbia and Ontario. That's right, the exact volume of imports they once bought from California was being replaced with domestic output. Coincidence? Hardly. The numbers are brutal. U.S. tomato exports to Canada were worth $340 million annually. That's 400 farming families left scrambling rural school districts suddenly short on funding small hospitals, losing their already razor-thin financial margins. For farmers like Sarah Martinez, a third-generation grower from Salinas Valley, the news hit like a wrecking ball. She recalled pouring her first cup of coffee when her distributor called Canada's pulling the plug, effective immediately. 40 years of cross-border trade gone in a single phone call, and Canadian officials knew exactly what they were doing. This wasn't about pesticides. It was about reducing dependence on a neighbor whose agricultural policies had become unpredictable and erratic. In one move, Canada shielded itself from American volatility and strengthened its domestic food security. Think about it. America wasn't rejected because its tomatoes were bad. It was rejected because Canada didn't need them anymore. That's a far more dangerous reality. Now, while Canada was slamming the door, guess who was quietly opening a new one to the South Mexico? And they didn't just tiptoe through, it was a full-on parade. Within weeks of Canada's ban, Mexico signed a jaw-dropping $12 billion agreement with European agricultural conglomerates. The speed of the deal left Washington stunned. This wasn't just a trade partnership, it was a tectonic shift. Here's the breakdown. $7.2 billion went into greenhouse infrastructure and hydroponic farming systems that use 40% less water and guarantee year-round harvests. $3.1 billion built the arteries of global trade, new highways, ports, and cold storage facilities to ship fresh produce efficiently across oceans. $1.7 billion fueled human capital training programs, agricultural universities, and research centers to ensure Mexico wasn't just catching up but leaping ahead. And the payoff? Within 8 months, premium Mexican tomatoes were already on European supermarket shelves, cheaper by 23% compared to American exports. Maria Elena Vasquez, an agricultural economist in Guadalajara, called it strategic brilliance. And she was right. Mexico didn't just fill a gap, it capitalized on the exact moment America's credibility was unraveling. European buyers, already fed up with supply chain disruptions from U.S. farms, suddenly had a reliable, cost-effective alternative. This wasn't just about seizing a market. This was about rewriting the map of global agriculture. Mexico positioned itself not as America's sidekick, but as a trusted supplier for Europe, a role the U.S. once owned. And here's the brutal irony: while American farmers were arguing with inspectors and praying for relief, Mexico was rebranding itself as the future. Let's drive down into the heart of rural America, the small towns that have fed the continent for generations. What happens when tomato trucks stop rolling? The devastation doesn't stop at the farm gate. It ripples outward like shockwaves from an earthquake. Take Watsonville, California. The once busy processing plant that employed 340 workers closed indefinitely. The trucking company that hauled produce to Canadian distributors running on skeleton crews. Even the local diner where drivers once grabbed lunch before hitting the road now sits half empty, its neon sign flickering like a warning light of economic collapse. Economists call this the multiplier effect. For every dollar lost in farm revenue, rural communities lose another $1.87 in related activity. But folks here don't need economic jargon. They call it what it feels like: devastation. Property values have dropped nearly 20% in just 6 months. Schools are struggling as families pull up roots chasing jobs elsewhere. Janet Morrison, a superintendent in Delano, explained it with heartbreaking clarity. We're not just losing farm workers, we're losing entire families that have been here for generations. When the agricultural economy collapses, everything else follows: schools, hospitals, local businesses. It's all connected. And she's right. What's happening isn't just about tomatoes. It's about the slow strangulation of entire communities, the hollowing out of America's agricultural backbone. But let's zoom out. Because this isn't just a story of farmers and small towns, it's a story of geopolitics. Look around the world. Russia has restricted its grain exports. China has been hoarding massive stockpiles of corn and wheat. And the European Union, after being burned by its reliance on Russian energy, has learned a bitter lesson: never put all your eggs in one supplier's basket. So when Mexico offered itself as a stable, cost-efficient alternative, Europe didn't just see profit, they saw security, food security, national security. Dr. Klaus Weber, a trade analyst in Brussels, summed it up perfectly. America dominated agriculture because it was reliable, efficient, and stable. But once any of those qualities become questionable, alternatives suddenly look very attractive. This is the crux of the issue. Food isn't just food anymore, it's power, it's leverage. And while America is stumbling, others are making their moves. Canada is securing itself by building domestic supply. Mexico is strengthening its global partnerships. Europe is diversifying to reduce dependence. And the U.S., it's caught in paralysis, watching its dominance slip through its fingers. So here's the question. Nobody wants to ask. If America can lose its edge in tomatoes this quickly, what happens when the same pressures hit wheat, soybeans, or corn? Because, folks, this isn't about ketchup and salsa. It's about whether America can feed the world or whether it will soon be standing in line with a shopping basket. And here's where the knife twists: deeper technology and labor. Step inside one of Mexico's brand new greenhouse complexes, and you might think you've walked onto the set of a sci-fi movie. Rows upon rows of tomatoes grow under climate-controlled domes. Sensors track soil moisture, nutrients, and plant health in real time. Automated systems adjust temperature and irrigation with surgical precision. Harvesting robots glide down aisles, collecting produce without breaking a sweat. The results are staggering: 40% less water used. Harvest costs slashed by 41%. Crops delivered on schedule regardless of weather. And let's be blunt, American farms saddled with outdated infrastructure and regulatory red tape can't compete with that. But it's not just about machines, it's about people. Agricultural labor is leaving the U.S. in droves. Why work seasonally in California for $14 an hour when you can earn $18 with benefits in Mexico's greenhouses? Jose Ramirez, a veteran labor contractor from California's Central Valley, put it plainly: the best workers aren't chasing the American dream anymore. They're chasing the Mexican paycheck. And that brain drain, my friends, is perhaps the most dangerous shift of all. Because even if the U.S. were to regain market access tomorrow, who's going to work the fields? Who's going to bring the expertise? That pipeline of skilled labor is drying up fast, and rebuilding it could take decades. Meanwhile, American agricultural colleges report declining enrollment while Mexico's new programs are booming. The knowledge, the technology, the workforce all flowing south. So let's call it what it is. America isn't just losing markets, it's losing the future of farming itself. Now you'd think that when America's farmers are staring down financial ruin, Washington would act swiftly, decisively, like a general rushing reinforcements to the battlefield. But instead, we got dithering, delays, death by bureaucracy. 6 months into the crisis, the Department of Agriculture was still conducting assessments. Congressional hearings became finger-pointing sessions instead of strategy sessions. And here's the cruel irony: the safety nets farmers thought they could count on were useless. Crop insurance covers drought, not trade bans. Emergency relief, designed for hurricanes, not border closures. Subsidies, they don't matter if there's no market to sell into. So farmers were left twisting in the wind while politicians debated semantics. Trade representatives reassured everyone this was a temporary issue, yet offered no timeline, no plan, not even a coherent strategy. Meanwhile, Canada and Mexico were already cementing their new agricultural realities. Mexico streamlined approvals for billions in foreign investment. Canada doubled down on domestic greenhouses. Every day Washington hesitated was another day competitors pulled further ahead. Folks, let's be honest, this wasn't policy. It was paralysis. And in a global market that moves at lightning speed, paralysis is indistinguishable from surrender. But what about you? What about the consumer? Don't think you're spared from this drama. Since Canada's ban, U.S. supermarket tomato prices have soared 31%. That's your grocery bill climbing week after week. But the bigger story isn't price, it's loyalty. Retailers who once built entire marketing campaigns around California Fresh are now filling shelves with Mexican imports. Why? Because they're fresher, cheaper, and more consistent. Even the cooperatives that historically defended American farmers are under pressure from shoppers demanding affordability and reliability. And here's the irony, brace yourself, America, once the continent's food supplier, is becoming dependent on imports from countries that used to be its customers. Even more alarming, consumers are adapting. Surveys show growing acceptance of imported produce, even a preference for it thanks to lower prices and reliable supply. That old patriotic slogan, "Buy American," is losing its bite when the alternative is cheaper, tastier, and more dependable. So, while Washington bickers and farmers suffer, consumers are quietly rewiring their shopping habits. And once loyalty shifts in the grocery aisle, history shows it almost never shifts back. By now, you can see the pattern. This crisis isn't just about tomatoes rotting at the border. It's a test case, a preview of what could happen across America's agricultural empire. Think wheat, think soybeans, think corn, entire global supply chains worth hundreds of billions. If competitors could undercut U.S. dominance in tomatoes in less than a year, what's stopping them from replicating the model across other crops? History offers a chilling parallel. During the Great Depression, protectionist tariffs triggered a collapse in U.S. farm exports. Farmers went bankrupt, markets evaporated, and it took decades to recover. Today we're flirting with the same scenario, only this time America's rivals are ready to step in with advanced technology, capital, and infrastructure. Markets don't wait. They don't pause for American politics to catch up. They move to whoever delivers stability and value. And right now, that isn't the United States. So let's drop the illusions. The tomato crisis is not a one-off. It's a warning shot. And the question is not whether it could happen again, it's where, when, and how much worse the fallout will be. So here we stand, folks, at a crossroads. The tomato crisis has pulled back the curtain on America's vulnerabilities. Canada acted decisively to secure its food supply. Mexico seized the moment to reinvent itself as a global agricultural powerhouse. Europe diversified to protect itself from instability. And the United States. It hesitated. It was debated. I watched. The path forward is starkly clear. Either America invests in technology, modernizes its infrastructure, rebuilds its workforce, and restores its reliability, or it resigns itself to decline. Because here's the brutal truth. If America can lose $340 million worth of tomato exports in just 3 weeks, what else can it lose in 3 years? Will the United States remain the world's breadbasket, feeding nations with its abundance, or will it become just another customer at someone else's table, dependent on imports nostalgic for a past it no longer owns? That, my friends, is the question no one in Washington seems ready to answer. But history won't wait, and neither will the world.
The plant in nearby Amherstburg that bottles Crown Royal, an iconic Canadian whiskey with a storied history, is closing and shifting work to south of the border.
They're hurting Ontario. This is what I think about Crown Royal. That's what they could do. And I think everyone else should do the same thing. I'm going to hurt you. You're going to feel the pain in February when these people don't have a paycheck. And I'm going to stand up for the people of Ontario. Start supporting companies that make whiskey here by Ontario people. That's what we need to do, is support each other.
The news has hit like a thunderclap. Amherstburg, a quiet Canadian town sitting on the banks of the Detroit River, has just lost its heartbeat. The Crown Royal bottling plant, nearly a century old, a cornerstone of industry and pride, is shutting its doors and moving operations across the border to the United States. Do you feel the weight of that sentence? We're not just talking about machines falling silent. We're talking about history being interrupted. a community thrown into turmoil, and a country staring at yet another sign that its industrial backbone is creaking. Now here's the real question. Is this just one factory closing? A sad but isolated event? Or is this the opening act of something much larger? The unraveling of Canada's manufacturing landscape in the face of economic muscle and global corporate indifference. Tonight, we're not just covering a closure, we're peeling back the layers. Because behind every shuttered door, every lost job, there's a deeper story of trade wars, of political hesitation, of globalization playing its ruthless game. So buckle in. This isn't just about whiskey. This is about whether Canada can still protect its workers, its towns, its identity. Let's zoom in on Amherstburg itself, stitched together by small shops, local cafes, and the steady rhythm of factory life. For decades, the Crown Royal plant wasn't just a workplace. It was the town's anchor, the daily pulse that set life in motion. Every morning, workers clocked in, and the ripple spread outward. Cafes filled up with breakfast orders. Gas stations saw regular traffic. Local delivery services ran on the rhythm of the plant's shifts. Even schools and family routines bent around those work schedules. And now, the rhythm is broken. Suddenly, brutally. Imagine the moment. Workers filing out of the plant after an emergency meeting. Some of them in tears, others too stunned to speak. Families who had counted on steady paychecks now facing uncertainty. The diner owner down the street wondering how many fewer coffees she'll sell next week. The mechanic across town bracing for fewer oil changes. This is the domino effect of economic disruption. One closure doesn't just erase jobs, it ripples through every corner of community life. And it raises the painful question, how fragile has Canada's economy become when a single corporate decision can shake an entire town to its core? Make no mistake, Amherstburg is not just losing jobs. It's losing stability, identity, and confidence in the future. And folks, that wound cuts deeper than any balance sheet. Now let's talk about the brand itself, Crown Royal. For many Canadians, it's more than whiskey in a purple velvet bag. It's a symbol of heritage, craftsmanship, and pride. Born in Manitoba in 1939 to honor a royal visit, Crown Royal carried with it the aura of Canadian excellence, a product that could stand tall on the global stage. And yet, here we are. That very symbol of Canadian pride is now shifting its production heart south of the border. The irony is staggering. A brand called Crown Royal abandoning the very subjects it once represented. Think about it, a crown jewel of Canadian industry, polished by decades of work, now slipping quietly away across the Detroit River. What message does that send? That even symbols are disposable in the cold calculus of globalization. That heritage bows to efficiency, and loyalty has no place in the boardroom. For Amherstburg, the betrayal stings even more. Generations worked under that roof, contributing not just to a brand, but to a national identity. Now the velvet bag feels emptier, the crown tarnished, and the people are left wondering if even this could vanish. What else is on the chopping block? Now, if you ask Diageo, the multinational giant that owns Crown Royal, they'll tell you this is nothing personal, just business. Their official statement is wrapped in the usual corporate language, streamlining the North American supply chain, improving efficiency, optimizing logistics. Sounds neat, doesn't it? Almost mathematical. But behind those sterile phrases are 200 families staring at unemployment. Behind efficiency are children whose parents now wonder how to pay for hockey gear or the next month's rent. Let's be honest, efficiency is just another way of saying cheaper for us, harsher for you. To shareholders in London or New York, this is a tidy move. To workers in Amherstburg, it feels like being erased. And here's the contradiction. Crown Royal built its prestige on Canadian labor, Canadian water, Canadian communities. Yet those same communities are being discarded, sacrificed for margins on a spreadsheet. Do you see the irony? The company insists it's not leaving Canada. Some operations will stay in Quebec. But what about the workers in Ontario who gave decades of their lives? To them, streamlining is just a cold euphemism for abandonment. So here's the question. When did corporate loyalty vanish entirely? When did the pride of a brand become irrelevant next to the hunger of global shareholders? For Amherstburg, it's a brutal reminder that in the world of multinationals, people are expendable, heritage negotiable, and community stability always optional. But this isn't just about Diageo. Look south, across the Detroit River, and you'll see why the U is winning this game. During the Trump years, Washington weaponized tariffs and incentives like a master strategist. Goods were shielded. Canadian exports were targeted. And the message to multinationals was clear. Bring your operations here, and you'll be rewarded. Tax breaks, subsidies, friendlier labor laws, a landscape crafted to pull investment back onto American soil. And it worked. Manufacturing plants that once anchored Canadian communities are increasingly seduced by the promise of lower costs and stronger political backing in the United States. The Amherstburg closure is just one tile in a much larger mosaic. The quiet but relentless pull of industrial policy. Here's the metaphor. This is a chessboard. Washington moves boldly. Decisively tariffs here. Incentives there. Ottawa, on the other hand, responds like a hesitant player, unsure whether to defend or attack. And in chess, hesitation is fatal. The irony is stark. America, long accused of outsourcing, is now reindustrializing through aggressive strategy. Canada, once seen as a safe haven for stability, is watching its assets migrate south. So ask yourself, is Canada even playing the same game? Or is it still clinging to the illusion of a level playing field? Has already flipped the board. For companies like Diageo, the calculation is obvious. Follow the incentives. Follow the protection. Follow the power. And if that means leaving behind a century-old Canadian plant, well, so be it. This is the new reality. Not just a single factory closing, but a warning shot that the North American economic battlefield is shifting and Canada is standing dangerously still. And here's where the frustration boils over. Leadership, or rather, the absence of it. Mark Carney, once hailed as the guardian of economic stability during his tenure as governor of the Bank of Canada and later the Bank of England, is now being accused of dithering instead of firm action. Canadians have seen cautious language, hedging, and delays. The government in Ottawa has not exactly fared better. Faced with tariffs and an increasingly hostile trade environment, their response has been, a few talking points about long-term resiliency, promises of adjustments, abstract economic theories. But workers don't live in theories. They live in towns like Amherstburg. They don't need another lecture on supply chain dynamics. They need assurances that companies won't simply walk away. Think about the optics. In Washington, American leaders stand at podiums and declare their country open for business, offering incentives and demanding loyalty from corporations. In Ottawa, Canadians hear cautious, technocratic language that sounds like a financial report. Which of those inspires confidence? Which projects strength? And here's the uncomfortable truth. When investors watch Ottawa wobble, they don't see compromise. They see weakness. And weakness in global politics doesn't just lose jobs, it loses trust, investment, and the perception of stability. So let's ask the question bluntly. If Canada can't even defend one factory in Amherstburg, how can it defend its industries in the next trade war, the next tariff battle, the next geopolitical storm? For the people on the ground, the message is clear. Their leaders look outmatched. And in the ruthless arena of global economics, looking weak is almost as damaging as being weak. Now let's pull the camera back even further. Because Amherstburg isn't just Amherstburg. It's a snapshot of globalization at work. We've seen this pattern across industries. Factories relocate to cheaper jurisdictions. Jobs vanish. Communities hollow out. It's the same story in auto parts, food processing, even technology manufacturing. What's happening in Ontario today mirrors what happened in Michigan decades ago, when the Rust Belt became a graveyard of once thriving plants. Canada, in particular, faces structural vulnerabilities. The economy has long leaned on resources and energy, while manufacturing often plays second fiddle. Without strong industrial protections, communities like Amherstburg become exposed, dependent on the goodwill of global corporations whose loyalty ends the moment a tax break appears across the border. Here's an image for you. Globalization is like a giant river, flowing relentlessly toward the lowest cost and the highest profit. Countries that build strong levees through smart policy, incentives, and firm negotiation can manage the current. Countries that don't, they get swept downstream. So the bigger question emerges. Is Canada building levees, or simply hoping the river will change course on its own? Amherstburg suggests the latter. And unless that changes, more towns could find themselves drowning in the same flood of corporate relocation. History is full of warnings. Rust Belt in the 1980s, entire regions gutted when industries fled, leaving behind abandoned plants and generations of disillusioned workers. Look at parts of Europe. where protectionist policies, for better or worse, kept local industries alive long after globalization's first wave. And Canada, time and again, closures in auto plants, paper mills, and food processing facilities have left scars. Each time, leaders promised adaptation. Each time, workers were told the economy would transition. But here we are again, repeating the same cycle. The lesson is obvious. Nations that negotiate hard, protect strategically, and project confidence retain their industries. Those that hesitate, that try to please everyone, end up pleasing no one, least of all their own people. So the question remains, will Canada finally learn from these lessons? Or are we watching history repeat itself, one plant closure at a time? So let's stop pretending this is just about one plant. Amherstburg is the warning siren, the flashing red light on the dashboard. Because if it can happen here, it can happen anywhere. Canada's manufacturing towns from Windsor to Oshawa, from Quebec to Alberta are all vulnerable to the same forces. A global company decides the numbers look better in another jurisdiction. And overnight, hundreds of jobs vanish. Multiply that across industries. And you don't just get unemployment, you get communities unraveling, frustration boiling, trust in institutions collapsing. And here's the dangerous part. When people feel abandoned, politics changes, populism rises, regional discontent hardens. Leaders who promise quick fixes, no matter how unrealistic, suddenly sound appealing. We've seen this playbook in Europe, in the EU, and now the conditions are ripening in Canada. The question is simple but urgent. Does Ottawa grasp what's at stake? Because this isn't just about whiskey. It's about whether Canada can remain an industrial nation, or whether it's sliding toward a future as merely a resource exporter and consumer market for others' goods. Amherstburg is not just losing its plant, Canada is flirting with losing its future. So I'll leave you with this. A century-old plant has fallen. Will Canada rise to defend what remains, or quietly step aside as more dominoes tumble? The crown has slipped. The question now is whether Canada still has the will to wear it.